You guys please have a seat. So, excuse me, we're going to get started. Gordon, can you tell them? No. It's not per se.
All right, guys, we're starting.
So, Larry Coe. He is the VP of Studios at Kabam, and I recently heard you're in charge of 6 products at Kabam. Why don't you tell us your history, what brought you to Kabam, and what you're doing now?
Well, thank you for having me here. So like Jake just mentioned, my name is Larry Coe. I'm VP of Studios at Kabam, where Kabam is internally we have 4 different studios. We have grown quite a bit over the last several years. So right now in San Francisco, we have 2 studios, one of which that I manage. And under that studio, I oversee several different products span across web and mobile. Sure,
Just talk loud for him.
So those games include 3 web products: Dragons of Atlantis, Edge World, Godfather. Then we have some mobile products that are in development. One we just recently launched, which is sort of our first foray into the social casino space by the game called Kabam Slots. So I've been with the company for about 3 years. Prior to this, I worked at Electronic Arts, like a lot of sort of gaming folks in the Bay Area, and before that, I had several stints doing consulting and management consulting.
Okay. So Kabam, as probably most of you know, started out as Water Cooler and then rebranded to Kabam. I think that was after Kingdoms of Camelot came out, right?
That's correct.
So Kabam had its entire focus on social, on Facebook. And this evolution came about where now they're additionally, not refocusing, but additionally focusing on mobile. The monetization strategies, the user acquisition strategies are very different for both platforms. How does a studio pursue successful development on multiple platforms when you have limited resources?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always been one of the big challenges that I think the company has also doing an awesome job of sort of constantly overcoming. So I think, like I mentioned, I've been with the company for about 3 years, but within those 3 years alone, we probably shifted direction. Probably like I can't even count the number of times. The company started off, like you mentioned, as Water Cooler, where we were primarily focused on building community-based apps for sports teams, TV shows, movie franchises, whatever people could gather around and talk about. And we launched this game called Kingdoms of Camelot, which was sort of our first sort of entry into core gaming. And then at that point, we were primarily a Facebook game developer. That's what our background was in. We did a lot of web product development. We knew how to sort of tap into the Facebook viral channels. So leveraging that knowledge, and then also taking into some best practices in terms of monetization that we were slowly starting to learn from Asian free-to-play gaming companies and so forth. We built a lot of that stuff into Kingdoms of Camelot, and we ended up becoming one of the top core strategy game developers on Facebook for a good year and a half or so. But like a lot of you guys know that if you guys have worked on Facebook, the platform itself has changed a lot since it first opened up in 2007. There was sort of this Wild West period where you could, make your game and have your users post whatever messages or invites and all that kind of stuff. And everyone probably saw a lot of these apps that are just skyrocket traffic flowing. Facebook started limiting what you can do with those viral channels, so that had a huge impact on the user acquisition side of things. But I think the biggest thing that really made us sort of rethink sort of our platform strategy was sort of the introduction of Facebook credits. For the longest time, we were able to grow our business by generating and making Kingdoms of Camelot into a highly monetizing game where we were able to just really keep our players engaged for a long time and continue to monetize off those players. But once Facebook introduced Facebook credits, now they were taking 30 cents on the dollar, and it was having a huge impact on sort of how we think about our sort of our financials. So started looking at that, but we also realized that Facebook wasn't the only place that people were spending their time. It was actually just a very small slice of a channel where we can acquire and keep players engaged. there was this whole other side of the online space, called the world, the web, where we knew there were, that's what, there was a ton of different channels and opportunities we could acquire users and find users that, maybe necessarily didn't want to play games on Facebook, but they were interested in playing our type of games, but they just didn't want to play through Facebook. And, we were able to sort of successfully make that pivot by launching our own gaming portal called Kabam.com. And that started off sort of next sort of phase of our company where we started expanding out from just Facebook to going out to Kabam.com and all these other gaming sites like Contagion and so forth. And then this whole mobile explosion started happening. We saw this trend happening where we saw basically player engagement started like shifting towards more on mobile. So I think, to be quite honest, I think if you ask anyone at Kabam, I think if you had to do things all over again, we probably would have decided to have jumped into mobile a lot earlier. But we were still able to sort of see the trend that was happening, in that players, gamers were were starting to shift their time towards mobile. So we ended up just quickly hustling. We ended up taking our top franchise, the Camelot, to the iOS, which was just launched last March. So I think just a month ago was our sort of a 1-year anniversary of our first mobile product launch. And, a ton of learnings. But I think that just shows sort of our ability to sort of identify where the players are going, where their time is being spent. And I think now we're constantly trying to stay ahead of where the next sort of shift might happen. I think there's a lot of theories that are coming up, but we're sort of trying to make sure through research and by trying to stay ahead of industry trends that we'll be well positioned for that.
So having experience in both Facebook and social, social and mobile, you can see the differences in the way players interact, especially the way they monetize.
Yep.
It seems like a lot of studios take what they learned from Facebook and just simply reapply it to mobile. But do you see any unique differences in the way that monetization specifically behaves between Facebook and mobile?
Oh yeah, I mean, not gonna lie, I think when we first launched our mobile products, because we came from a very, very web product development background, mobile was a whole different beast in terms of how you sort of think about user experience, and then also the payment sort of strategies as well too. I remember when we first launched a mobile product, we were actually sort of surprised by like the payment conversion rate on the iOS, and it actually makes sense. If you guys have played any of the iOS products, sort of payment flow actually is a lot easier if you already have an iTunes account. So that kind of stuff actually sort of led us to sort of rethink about how we wanted to optimize the user experience so that players can continue to sort of stay really, really engaged with their games, but also get a lot of value out of the payments that we're making. But I think this is something that we're still learning today in terms of sort of how to sort of optimize even sort of velocity of changes that we make to the product. In the web world, we were able to make changes on the fly whenever we wanted to.
Without resubmitting to the store.
Exactly, but now it's sort of more of a client download model where if you want to push out a major update, the user has to download a client to be able to get access to new content. So we're constantly sort of trying to figure out the best way to sort of optimize that experience.
So Kings of Camelot and The Hobbit have been tearing up the charts. Strategically, do you see it better to focus on currently successful IP and continue to expand those universes? Or how much resources do you develop towards new and emerging IP?
Yeah.
Where's the split? How do you determine where to put the resources?
Yeah, so my view on the ideal portfolio strategy is, first and foremost, we put a lot of value in our franchises. So Kings of Camelot, I think sometime early last year it passed the $100 million gross revenue mark, which puts it one of the top 10 strategy games of all time. With Kings of Camelot on iOS, we were able to eclipse that. I think recently we just announced that it's close to 200 million or higher with both those games. So that's a very, very valuable franchise for us. It has a lot of equity behind it. But we also have Dragons of Atlantis. It's another one of the key franchises. So we put a lot of sort of focus on trying to keep, sort of growing those key franchises because we know it has a lot of IP equity value. But at the same time, we know like big brands like The Hobbit attracts a huge different segment of consumers that have probably never played our type of games. So from trying to get more users into the Kabam network. And they, like those IPs like The Hobbit, The Godfather, and one of the newest IPs that we just recently announced, the Fast and Furious. We know like those kind of IPs are going to help bring in different demographic of users as we continue to grow. And then at the same time, we need to continue creating new IPs. And those always have a high risk profile because you just never know, like, I think, which IPs are really going to resonate. We do a lot of qualitative and quantitative research to sort of try to give ourselves the best shot at launching the next big hit IP. But it's a very iterative business, so we continue to try to sort of make some bets in terms of coming out with the next big franchise. So we try to sort of segment, sort of split our portfolio into 3 different areas so we can continue to grow our existing and then acquire new users, but also invest in it for the future.
Do you have any plans to have true multiplayer across platforms? So a Facebook player can play with a mobile player, can play with a Kabam.com player?
So right now, actually, a Facebook player can play with Kabam.com player across the web.
But not with mobile?
Not with mobile yet. But I think that's something that we are, I think for those of you guys that attended GDC, I think one of the big hot topics was cross-platform gaming. I think as we think about what the next emerging platform is going to be, my view is that cross-platform is going to be sort of a new emerging platform in itself. So not just web or mobile or tablet, but the ability to play your game, your session, as you're walking to work on your iPhone, and be able to sort of continue that gameplay session at work, hopefully during lunchtime.
Or not.
Depends if they blocked the domain.
And then when you go home, being able to play on your tablet, which my wife gives me a ton of crap about whenever I do that.
Yours too.
Yeah. No, but I see that as becoming sort of this dominant game use case, and that's sort of avenue that we're definitely trying to push for. But I think for those of you guys that play Kabam games, we try to sort of emphasize on the social aspects of our gaming. So sort of being able to have people play with other players at any platform, that is something that we're continuously putting a lot of sort of resources behind it.
Mid-core has become a buzzword, and I heard you mention core games. I think you're referring to mid-core. Kind of this evolution from very, very casual to adding in kind of AAA hooks, traditional core mechanics into this evolved this mid-core. And like I said, it's become a buzzword recently. How does Kabam uniquely identify itself in this mix of mid-core games that are emerging?
Yeah, I feel like this whole demographic profiling amongst the game sort of player segments has become sort of somewhat of a big discussion. I know, I just recently read this article about how casual game players are just as hardcore as hardcore game players, which I agree. I mean, any of you guys that have seen some really, really hardcore addicted Candy Crush players, I mean, those folks are really, really hardcore. And I think they have some problems sleeping at night because they can't stop thinking about Candy Crush. So I think when I think of like different player segments, I think you can make a case for that each sort of hardcore, whether they're hardcore, mid-core, or casual, that they all have hardcore tendencies.
Breakdowns with them.
Yeah. So when I think of mid-core, I think of it as sort of from sort of what that profile looks like. And as we were trying to define like what that player segment looked like as well, we did we ended up doing like our whole research team did a lot of sort of work on this, and what we found out was like it was there tend to be a little bit more male skewed, so not like completely all male like we see with really, really hardcore, like the sort of traditional definition of hardcore, but about 60-40 male-female, around 18-24 range, and they are open to playing a pretty wide range of games like strategy, RPG, even puzzle, casino games, and they tend to be a lot more social, not wanting to share what their achievements are like. They tend to like really be into progression-based type of games, and that's the type of game experience that we're creating. And up until this point, we've been doing a lot of strategy games. So if you look at our portfolio, you'll be able to find all sorts of different strategy games. But based on like sort of all this sort of research that we did in terms of what our player demographic looks like, this year we've been putting a lot more focus on trying to sort of branch out into new type of gameplay. So our Fast and Furious game, which is in beta. It's going to come out worldwide very, very soon. The movie's actually just around the corner.
Yeah.
That game is going to be very different from what our Kabam audience is probably used to expecting. It's it sort of fits towards more that mid-core game experience that consumers have towards, which is very progression-based, light session, and the ability to sort of be social and play with other friends.
What are some of the organic or viral channels that you see on social and mobile that the younger developers, those who don't have the deep pockets of Kabam, take advantage of on each platform?
So, I think if you're releasing a mobile game, because we've been investing a lot of sort of time and resources into releasing hit products on mobile platforms, and I think one of the cool things I've been seeing is for those of you folks that worked on console packaged goods games, if you wanted to get a hit product, you needed to get the end cap at the Walmart, Best Buy, or whatever to be able to sort of get the customers that are coming in through those doors to see those games, and those games usually had the best chance of succeeding. Right now, Apple and Google Play, they're sort of digital storefronts. I mean, they are pretty much the Walmart, Best Buys of this new mobile gaming world. And I think the cool thing that I've seen with them is that they've been pretty fair about like what kind of games they want to feature. So if I'm an indie sort of small developer, now I'm sure, I highly recognize, I know even the Apple team, they're looking for very, very innovative, gameplay, where it doesn't have to be like this crazy, high, flashy 3D type of game. It just needs to be new, unique, and fresh. So I was recently playing this game called, I think it's called Ridiculous Fishing. By no means is it this, this AAA type of game, but it's very, very addicting if you have to try to play it. And I think Apple saw this as being a very unique gameplay as well too. They're featuring it, which is able to sort of help get that game get like 1 million+ downloads. So I think that's one angle. But also like all these viral channels are super valuable as well too. So I know like Facebook, obviously I think everyone knows about the value of getting your games to connect to Facebook Connect and putting in some innovative integration so that people can share their achievements and their accomplishments. But Twitter, so I think so also is emerging as an interesting channel as well too. So talk to some folks that integrated Twitter channels and they were able to see some success.
So, especially on mobile, it seems that the U.S. has been following the trends of Japan. Initially, the U.S. is about 5 years behind the Japanese market, and then about 2 years behind the Japanese market. Now, it seems like once a new genre emerges in Japan, about 6 months later, it emerges here in the U.S. The card battle games are a good example of that.
Right.
At Kabam, do you analyze other global markets to see what's trending, or do you have other methods of predicting trends here in the U.S.?
I mean, I think the battle card game, that example, I think quite honestly, I think that one sort of caught us by surprise. And we've been doing sort of a lot deeper research into making sure we're staying ahead of the charts on all the games. And I think I was just out at Korea G-Star in November, and was just blown away by like the different type of games that were out there. And that sort of gave us a good snapshot of the type of games that are going to be coming out in Korea, and eventually coming over to the West as well too. So, we've been looking at for a lot of inspiration and sort of trying to see what the next type of hit gameplay mechanic might be coming out of Korea, China, and Japan. We're definitely trying to stay ahead of as well too. We know the free-to-play game developers out there have been sort of refining their skill sets and their craft for a long time. So we know there's a lot of sort of good innovative best practices that we can learn from. But also, if you look at it, even just the European territories as well. I mean, they've historically always been really good at developing really, really high quality production value games. And with these, with the hardware specs of devices today, like all those type of gameplay in production values are able to work really well as well on tablets and phone devices. So trying to make sure that we can sort of take those learnings as quickly as possible and be well positioned for those type of new trends emerging.
So you mentioned Kabam.com earlier, and then as well, when I was looking at the site, with Google Plus as another platform.
Yeah.
Do you see much value in some of these other extensions, these other platforms, aside from Facebook and mobile?
Yeah, I mean, so Kabam.com has been a very, very successful gaming portal for us. So we just
No rev share.
Huh? Yeah, I mean, we control the payment. We get to sort of work with various different payment providers. So I think that we've been able to sort of get to work with various partners that was able to sort of help us sort of continue to expand our users to help them stay engaged with our games. But it's been pretty interesting because I think when we first started off this Kabam.com initiative, I think there were some people sort of worried about whether or not we'd be able to attract enough gamers to this platform. But like I mentioned before, when we sort of made the decision to get off of Facebook, sort of get a lot of our games off of Facebook and sort of create our own new game world, the reason behind this was because we knew that there was, based on our sort of analysis, a ton of gamers, millions and millions of gamers that were out there that weren't playing games on Facebook still. And they just wanted to be able to sort of play with their anonymous identity on a site that was dedicated just towards core games. And we've been able to grow Kabam.com to a point now where we are able to start publishing third-party titles. So we have a lot of developers who are reaching out to us, wanting to tap into the audience that we have, which are tend to be a little bit more on the core games, core gamers that they tend to like strategy RPG games. So if you look at Kabam.com today, you'll be able to find a dozen plus games that are not outside of the strategy, RPG games, we have some action RPG games as well. And I think that just sort of speaks to sort of the reach that we've been able to get to with Kabam.com.
Good. Recently it was announced that Kabam is now pursuing mobile publishing.
Right.
It seems like there's mobile publishers emerging almost every week. How is Kabam going to differentiate some of its offerings as a publisher?
Yep. So I just talked about Kabam.com. I think one of the unique values and advantages is that we have an existing user base where those group of users really like playing games where you can sort of engage with other players, form guilds, alliances, play strategy games or RPG games. But on the mobile side, we've been able to sort of build up a pretty strong user base as well too, across Kings of Camelot, Arcane Empires, and The Hobbit. And we've been able to establish a lot of strong relationships with not only the platform partners, but also various different marketing channel partners as well too. So for developers that have strong, unique content, we're able to provide them with marketing support. But also at the same time, we're able to also provide them with monetization guidance as well. This is something that we take a lot of pride in terms of figuring out ways to help game developers continue to keep their players engaged for not just weeks and months, but hopefully for years, where they're constantly sort of staying engaged with your game and continuously paying for the service that you're providing. So with those two areas are sort of the key things that we've been putting a lot of emphasis on. And it's been pretty surprising. It's been a pretty new initiative, but we've been able to see a lot of sort of progress on the publishing front with just a lot of developers that we didn't even know before that have just awesome, unique content that we were just getting a chance to work with.
Okay. Finally, what are some of the games that you enjoy playing right now?
Yeah, so I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty hooked on Candy Crush myself. So that's one game.
You and my business partner.
Yeah. But I've been playing a lot of our new game, Fast and Furious. It's just in beta right now. It's actually a product that I had just really enjoyed working because it's sort of our first product that's going into 3D gaming, super high fidelity, and it's going to be very, very different. And it's, I think it's going to be, I think that the worldwide date hasn't been announced yet, but it's going to be coming out in the next few weeks. But outside of that, whenever I have some time, I'm trying to sort of finish BioShock Infinite, which is it's been hard to sort of find time. I've been playing a lot of some of these other games on my mobile device.
So you don't know the ending?
I don't know the ending yet.
I won't spoil it.
I've gotten some hints from several folks of what the ending might be like, but I'm very, very close to finishing it. So
okay.
I'm trying to get that done sometime in the next few days.
Good luck. Any questions from the audience? Ian.
You've got kind of a cool split between the mobile, Kabam.com, and the Facebook properties. there's been talk about, obviously you're giving away 30% when you're dealing with Facebook stuff, but there's been a fair amount of talk that the Facebook Connect users monetize better. Are you able to speak to that? And if so, is it enough to offset the payment, or do you find they monetize about the same? However you want to go on that.
No, we've definitely seen players that are sort of connected to social graphs and that have more friends and are able to share more of their accomplishments within games. They tend to be definitely a lot more engaging than players that aren't doing those activities, whether it's joining an alliance or whatnot. So, there's definitely value there, and higher engagement eventually leads to higher ARPU. So then you can sort of do the math and sort of connect the dots. But we tend to try to get our players, sort of help them understand the value of what that's like, because it does lead to a much better gaming experience as well too. So a player that's part of an alliance with another 20 other or so players, they'll tend to be able to sort of understand the gameplay mechanics better, understand the strategies a lot better, because they're all having conversations about what to do, what not to do, and we try to sort of foster and facilitate that learning process.
Any other questions? Tyler, your hand was first.
Sure. So on Facebook, what I found pretty common was that there were a lot of different ways that you monetize, and it's sort of like a pie chart, a bunch of things. But you look at two games that have been very successful. Clash of Clans has one monetization mechanic, which is the speed up, and Candy Crush really kind of has one primary monetization mechanic. What do you feel is really important in how you evaluate building a killer monetization mechanic for your upcoming apps?
Yeah, no, I think you mentioned two games which we definitely sort of been studying a lot as well too, because they're very different from how we sort of monetize our game as well. And I think when people sort of look at our game, the obvious thing probably that sort of comes up is that it's very, it's a time-based game. But if you look, the way I think we've been sort of being able to monetize our games to the point where Kings of Camelot on Facebook is a 3+ year-old product, but even today it's still generating multiple millions on a monthly basis. And the way we've been able to do this is not just because it's just the way we monetize, but also the continuous service that we would provide, and continuous sort of content. And when I talk about content, it's not just new RPs or new features, it's also the way our product team is able to provide engaging events. But in terms of the design sort of you speak to, I think Candy Crush and Clash of Clans with two design mechanics sort of speaks to the amount of sort of best practice design, monetization designs that are out there. I mean, if you look at battle card games, that's another unique design monetization that's out there. I think the important thing is being able to design your game so that you can sort of get to a point where you can have evergreen monetization status. So when we sort of think about game development, we're constantly thinking of ways that designing and tuning, and constantly sort of split testing our game design so that get the players in, get them to get really, really engaged, and then once they're engaged, sort of putting in hypotheses around what will trigger monetization, whether it's a time-based mechanic or some energy type of mechanic. And I don't think there's one sort of best practice, as you guys clearly have seen in the top grossing charts. But I think the most important thing is sort of having, as you guys are going to game development, sort of having sort of a design philosophy in mind on how you plan on keeping the players engaged and being able to monetize off that player base.
Mark, you have your hand up too?
Yeah. So question on monetization strategies, right? So you've got your 30% sold to Facebook, you've got your 30% sold to Apple. So in your original vision, you talked about you have a vision where I'm playing the game on Facebook in the morning, and on my way to work, I'm maybe playing on my iPhone, and then I get to work, then I'm playing on my office computer or not. So the question is that your games all use the same identity and the same virtual currency. Is there a strategy to get around the tolls a little bit? Well, this person he bought his virtual currency when he was at home on his computer, not connected to Facebook. So therefore, Apple, I don't owe any money, and Facebook, I don't owe any money. But if he bought it on Facebook, and if he bought it on iPhone at that point, then I don't owe any money. Do you have a strategy around that, or is that not really?
No, that's a good question. I think that's something that as we think about the sort of going multi-platform, been thinking about. I know.
That he's a payments guy, so
Yeah.
of course he's gonna ask about that.
That's a very, very good question. I think, because I think that's exactly the scenario. So we know, a player that spends on Kabam.com, there is no transaction fees, or the transaction fees are just usually with the payment providers, which is much less than what Facebook or some other platforms charge. But I think the most important thing is, I think instead of optimizing for that, not for now, I mean, the first thing I'm trying to optimize for is making sure that the experience for the consumer is most optimal. So because we haven't even gotten to that step yet for right now of getting that, being able to deliver that type of experience for the consumer where they can play their game session across any platform. But once we're able to accomplish that, in parallel, there's been a lot of discussions around sort of what the optimal strategy is so that we can make sure, when a player is making a transaction, what sort of the primary platform should be.
And I wonder when Apple's going to get up in arms about that too. Because I can imagine you can inspire a player to buy the currency on Kabam.com,
Right.
which is significantly more of a percentage to you, and then it's available when they go to their iPhone.
No, and right now, the scenario and the use case I talked about, I mean, there are games out there that are doing this today. So I know there are companies out there that are probably actively trying to figure out how to sort of min-max sort of that platform payment strategy. But I think everyone can probably agree that even those folks that are sort of figuring out these sort of challenges today, the first thing is sort of making sure that you're delivering the most optimal consumer experience first, because we learned this numerous times over and over again when you sort of start losing sight of making sure that the consumer experience, we started losing sight of what the consumer experience should be and start focusing too much on optimizing for just monetization alone. The players will start speaking up really quickly from that, and they'll just tend to just move on to some other games.
Any other questions? Last call. Okay, time to drink. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.